A sacred place. And thanks to all of you this morning and always who do what you do to keep this and co-create this as a sacred place, because this Unity Center truly is that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for letting me be here again. Good for me. So Albert Einstein, yeah, right? Good for me, and good for you. Albert Einstein was once quoted as saying the most important decision we ever have to make is whether the universe is a friendly or unfriendly or hostile universe. So that's not very nice. And it's and it's not what we were expecting from him, right? But he went on to actually explain himself. And you also want to remember here that he died in 1955. So these things he said was back there. So he said, if we decide that the universe is an unfriendly place, then we will use our technology, our scientific discoveries, and our natural resources to achieve safety and power by creating bigger walls to keep out the unfriendliness and bigger weapons to destroy all that which is unfriendly. And I believe that we're getting to a place where technology is powerful enough that we may either completely isolate or destroy ourselves as well in this process. If we decide that the universe is neither friendly nor unfriendly, and that God is essentially playing dice with the universe, and we are simply victims to the random toss of the dice, there we are, and our lives have no real purpose or meaning. But if we decide that the universe is a friendly place, then we will use our technology, our scientific discoveries, our natural resources to create tools and models for understanding that universe. Because power and safety will come through understanding its workings and its motives. So I'm going to tell you a story that even if you've never heard it, you already know it. And if it is familiar, the hope is that you will discover that you know more of it than you thought you did. And it's a true story. Well, all stories are true stories, right? They may not have actually happened, but every story is a true story. But this story, this event actually happened. So stay with me here. On the first night of the Holy Day, over 150 years ago, Rabbi Shalom of Bells, known as the Angel of Peace, ordered his attendant to harness his horses rather than go into the synagogue to signal the beginning of prayer. This is actually a picture of Rabbi Shalom, not actually looking like an angel of peace, but you know, it's a very old photograph, and sometime in the mid-1800s that photograph was taken, so I have to remember that. So he told his attendant, he said, we're going into the woods. And the astonished attendant wanted to remind the Rebbe that thousands of Hasidim were waiting for him in the shul, but he knew better than to ask any questions, so he did what he was told and went out and prepared the wagon. And after a half-hour drive, the Rebbe, the rabbi, signaled the attendant to stop, and they alighted and walked down a narrow path until they saw a small hut in the distance. The rabbi signaled the attendant to wait for him, and then he tiptoed alone up to the window and peeked in. An old man was sitting alone at a table, and in front of him was a bottle of vodka and 2 small cups, one in front of him and one in front of the seat opposite. Through the window, the rabbi couldn't hear what the man was saying, but clearly he was talking. But he saw him raise the cup in a toast, drink it, and then drink the second cup as well. And he did this 2 more times. After which the rabbi tiptoed back to the attendants, and they walked quickly to the wagon, and the rabbi motioned him to drive back to Bells. Meanwhile, the Hasidim, those were waiting, 5,000 people, were waiting for him for over an hour and were certainly clearly worried, but as soon as the door opened and he came in, there was silence. And all eyes were on him as he took his place at the front of the shul, and the room burst into prayer. It's not me. It's not. As we go on. So the prayer ended, and the rabbi said to his secretary, there's an old man who came in after everybody else, and he's going to finish his prayers after everybody else. So when he's done, would you please tell him to meet me in my study? Now, in a synagogue, prayer is done a little differently. You know, here we come together, we pray together. But in a synagogue, especially an Orthodox synagogue of that time, the women be on one side or upstairs, not downstairs, upstairs. The women would be upstairs, and the men would be on the other side, and people would pray in their own time, in their own way, which is really kind of beautiful. So people would finish at different times, and there was a lot of noise, right? So an hour later, the old man was standing in fear and trepidation in front of the Rebbe. "Sit down, Zelig," said the rabbi. "I want you to tell me what you did in your house before you came here. What were those 2 cups of vodka and that strange blessing you made?" "The rabbi knows that? How does he know that?" as he was shaking. "I sensed something important was going to happen, so I drove into the woods and I peeked in your window. And I want to understand what you were doing." "The rabbi peeked in my window? How could that be? I'm a nothing." Now the poor man was really confused, and he was silent, and he realized there was no alternative, so he sank down into the chair and began to explain. "I'm a poor man. I have no children. My wife passed on some years ago. I just live alone with my few farm animals. That's all. That is until a few months ago when my cow became sick. So I prayed to God to heal the cow. After all, I said to God, you create the entire universe with everything in it. Certainly you can cure one little old cow." But the cow got worse. So I said, "Listen, God, you don't heal the cow. I'm not going to shul anymore. I figure that if God doesn't care about me, why should I care about him? It's nothing for him to heal one cow. Why should I care about his place?" But the cow died, and I got mad. And I stopped going to the synagogue. Then my goat got sick. I said to God, "You haven't had enough? You think I'm bluffing? I mean, if this cow dies, I'm not putting on my tallis, my prayer shawl anymore." So the goat died, and I stopped wearing my tallis. Next, my chickens got ill. And I told God, if they die, I'm not going to recite prayers or keep the Shabbos anymore. Well, a week later, I was without my chickens, and God was without my Shabbos, the Sabbath. And I held out for over a week until I realized that the high holy days were coming. And I thought to myself, "Zelig, you're not going to observe with the Rebbe? What, are you crazy?" But then again, I was angry with God, and I vowed I wasn't going to go to shul. But then I remembered one time that I had this argument with Shlomo the butcher. For a month, we didn't even say hello to each other. But then one night, he came to my house with a bottle of vodka and said, "Let's forget the past and be friends again. Enemies, we have enough of." So we made 3 blessings, we shook hands and even danced around a little bit, and we were friends again. So I thought I'd do the same thing with God. I invited him to sit opposite me. I poured us 2 cups, and I said, "Listen, God, you forget my faults, I'll forget yours. All right, a deal? L'chaim." So I drank my cup, but knowing, of course, that God doesn't drink, he probably wanted me to drink his. So we did this 2 more times, and then we danced around a little together, and then I felt better, and I came to shul. The rabbi looked very deeply into Zelig's innocent eyes. And in a serious tone, he said, listen, before we began this holy day, I had this sense, I saw in heaven that there was a terrible degree on our congregation because the members were saying the words to the prayers, but they weren't really praying seriously to God. They were reading the words, but it wasn't coming from their hearts. Of course, there's lots of distractions, there's lots of excuses always. But you, Zelig, you talk to God like God is your friend. And your sincerity saved the entire congregation. So I just want to tell you that this synagogue was dedicated in 1843. It resembled an ancient fortress. It was in the city of Belz, which is either, depending on who's in charge, it's either in eastern Poland or western Ukraine. And it stood until 1939 when the Nazis came in, invaded Belz. And though they tried to destroy it by fire and then by dynamite, it wouldn't go. And finally, they conscripted Jewish men in forced labor to take the building apart brick by brick. So now, it seems more than ever, it's really important for us to attend to our own relationship with Spirit, with God, however it is we do that. And I've recently learned this saying in Hebrew, and it just really grabbed me. Not the Hebrew part, because I don't understand Hebrew. But it's often inscribed on the ark, which is, the ark is a cabinet in a synagogue that holds the Torah being the first 5 books of the Bible. And it's a very holy, holy thing. And it reminds people that when they gather together to worship, that it is a friendly, wonderful place, but it's also a place of reverence. And not to become so relaxed to forget that important sacredness of the sacred place. It tells us that as we open our hearts and our minds and our souls, we can feel this presence and power. And that while this is a holy place, everything's a holy place. And so the saying is da LIFNEI mi ATTAH omed. Da LIFNEI ma ATTAH oned. But what it means, this is so amazing to me. Know before whom you stand. Know whom before you stand. Which for me is so holy to take that in. See, that picture is of Moses at the burning bush. And something I just absolutely love about Unity is the way we use Bible interpretation. We take the events and the people and the year, the numbers, and all of it, and we interpret it as states of consciousness within our own being. So for me, this burning bush has always been this flame that's alive in us, because the burning bush kept burning, but it never burned up. It wasn't a fire that destroyed. It was a fire that enhanced and built and was creative. Have you ever felt that? Have you had this fire burn inside of you where you know what you know, that you have to do, that you need to do, that you got to do? And it's solemn, but it's also exciting and wonderful. And when Moses asks, who are you? Who is it I'm standing before? And the answer is, I am that I am. Isn't that gorgeous? So that inside of you, that's on fire but will not be extinguished, that's on fire within you that has to have its place of expression, is the I am that I am. It's our second principle, right? Our first principle is that there is one power and one presence. I mean, I just love that because it just says it. And and our second principle is that this power and presence we are a part of. And like I told you last time, it's a part of us the way a drop of water is in the ocean, not, according to Eric Butterworth, a raisin in a bun. I love that. Isn't that great? A drop of water in the ocean, not a raisin in a bun. So I ask you, is your life at this moment in time, right now, is your life big enough for that fire? Is your life big enough for your soul expressing as it absolutely has to? And it's a yes or no question, but it doesn't really need or warrant an answer. It's a question to live in, to engage in, perhaps to take into your meditation. Are you walking your talk? Do you mean what you say? Do you know before whom you stand? In the book of Deuteronomy, this commandment is given, that you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Keep these words that I am commanding you today in your heart. The book of Deuteronomy is in the Hebrew or the Old Testament. That's very powerful. Now, the New Testament is really a mirror, a reflection of the Old Testament. And just, it's sort of updated, the words. Now, there's been so much study done on the Gospels and who wrote what and when were they written and did it even happen and did Jesus even live? I mean, there's the gamut of that. And in a way, it doesn't even matter because the teachings are so powerful and wonderful. When Jesus was asked by a Sadducee, what commandment is first? I mean, what am I supposed to do? What's the main thing I'm supposed to do with my life and my being? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. I think of the 12 powers you have around this room, and it sort of encompasses that. And now here's the tricky part. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no greater commandment. There is no other commandment greater than these. Now, love your neighbor as yourself. Do you love yourself unconditionally? Do you accept yourself without judgment and honor that fire burning in yourself all the time? I mean, maybe we need to love our neighbor more than ourselves. You know, that reminds me of is it 4 agreements? 4, 5? I know there's a 5th one too. But the one that always spoke to me was always do your best. Because I realized that I was always trying to do better than my best. That my best wasn't enough. I had to do more. And it really taught me to just back off and know my best is what it is. I had a board president at a church I served, and she used to say, it's good enough. It's good enough. You know, instead of reaching out this way, to reach down this way. So, you know, I never really had thought about this one before. It's very interesting. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now, when I was 5 years old, living in the Bronx, I had 2 girlfriends that went to Holy Cross, you know, the Catholic school across University Avenue, where the NYU campus was, the Bronx campus. And they were in school, so they were learning to read and do all the cool stuff I wasn't doing yet in kindergarten. And one afternoon, they showed me how they pray. So they got on their knees, and they mumbled something. I thought it was mumbling. And then they made the sign of the cross. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. So that night, before I went to bed in my seersucker pajamas, I got on my knees by my little single bed, sharing the room with my brother, who was 3 years younger, and I mumbled the words, and I made the sign of the cross on my chest. Well, my father, Irving A. Levine, who was usually a very mild-mannered man and father, saw this. And now we'd been raised secular, you know, no religion, but the ethnicity. So the next day, my mother marched me over to the synagogue, where I'd never been. Nobody went there. Nobody in our family. And she explained the situation that she wanted me in Sunday school. And they explained, well, we don't take children this young. They have to already be reading. And this thing my mother said was, my mother, who would make anybody quake in their shoes, she said, if you don't take her, the Catholic Church will. So there I was in Sunday school for just a couple of months until it was inconvenient for the family to take me, and that was sort of that. But something happened in those 2 months. I don't even remember, but I learned one thing, one Hebrew phrase that I didn't even understand, but it became comfort to me in my life. I would say this in bed at night before I went to sleep. And really what it is, it's that same statement that we say, that there is one presence and one power, that you love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. And this is it. It's here, which I used to thought was H-E-R-E, but it's H-E-A-R, hear. Listen, hear. Hear, O Israel, the Jewish people, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And that is our statement of faith, and it's just amazing. And, years later, as I found unity and became a unity minister, went to unity school, it just all fits so beautifully. And how, as a young child, that gave me so much comfort. And I didn't know anything about it, but just to have that one thing to do. So here it is. What's ours to do? To love ourselves, to love our neighbors as ourselves in these times, and maybe most importantly, to know before whom you stand. To know whom before you stand. Know before whom you stand. Know before whom you stand. Shalom, namaste.